Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're zeroing in on the latest buzz from Garmin.
That's right. They've just launched the new Forerunner 570 and 970 models.
And they come packed with some really interesting new features. Now, I bet the big question on your mind, because it was definitely mine, is will my current Garmin get any of this cool new stuff?
Exactly. That's what everyone wants to know, and that's what we're digging into. We've been going through a great piece by DC Rainmaker. He got some clarification from Garmin on their plans.
Oh.
And, well, the short version, yes, some older models look like they're set to get some of the new Forerunner 970 features.
Okay, good. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear then. We want to give you the straightforward breakdown. Which watches are getting what, and, what does this actually mean for you if you own a Garmin?
Let's do it.
So let's start with the basics. What are these new to Garmin features we're talking about, the ones generating all the discussion?
Right. So the 570 got some things, but the 970, that's the flagship. And it's got a whole suite of new metrics and functions.
Like what?
Okay, so there's running tolerance. Think of it maybe like a gauge,
Right.
how well your body's handling the training load. Could be useful for avoiding overtraining.
Interesting.
Then there's impact load factor, which sounds like it measures the sort of physical stress from your runs.
Okay.
For racers, there's auto lap by timing gates, which is neat. A suggested finish line feature too, and a projected race time predictor.
Pacing tools, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And interestingly, a couple of things, step speed loss and running economy, they actually require Garmin's new HRM 600 heart rate monitor.
Ah, so new hardware involved for those specific ones.
Seems like it, yeah. Unlocks more advanced metrics.
Ah.
Then for triathletes, a specific Garmin Triathlon Coach feature, plus managing multi-sport structured workouts from Connect right on the watch.
Okay.
And finally, enhanced ovulation cycle predictions that use skin temperature data.
Wow, okay. That is quite a list. Garmin's definitely been busy. But you said most of that is initially just on the 970.
That's right. The vast majority of those really novel software features debuted on the Forerunner 970.
Gotcha.
Although it's worth mentioning, the evening report,
Yeah.
that summary of your day and recovery stuff, that actually appeared on both the 570 and the 970.
Okay, a little bit shared then. But the big ticket items are 970 focused, at least for now.
Correct.
Yeah.
When we talk about what might trickle down, we're mainly looking at those 970 software exclusives.
All right, so the million-dollar question. Who gets these features later? Which existing Garmin watches are lined up for these updates?
Okay, so according to Garmin's official statement, as reported by DC Rainmaker, the current plan is to bring these new software features to the Fenix 8 series,
Right.
the Enduro 3,
Okay.
and the Tactics 8 variants. That'll happen through future software updates.
So if you've got one of those relatively recent high-end models, you're probably in luck.
Looks that way, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a good chance you'll see at least some of these things pop up eventually.
I sense a but coming.
Okay.
You mentioned Garmin's statement wasn't exactly ironclad.
Exactly. There's a significant caveat here. Garmin was careful with their wording. They said it's their current plan and they will get the features, but then immediately qualified it, saying it's more of a soft promise than a hard and fast guarantee.
Oh, okay.
They specifically stated they cannot comment on the exact timing or guarantee that all features will make it into these updates. So, it's important to keep that in mind. Plans can change.
Right. So intent is there, but no guarantees on timing or maybe even which specific features make the cut for those older models.
Precisely. Development takes time. Things can shift.
Okay, so Fenix 8, Enduro 3, Tactics 8 are the likely recipients. Now, the flip side, who's currently not on that list? Which popular models might be left feeling a bit overlooked?
Well, this is where it might get a bit disappointing for some folks. It looks like several quite recent and even premium devices are not currently planned to receive these specific new features.
Such as?
We're talking about the Forerunner 265,
Okay.
the Forerunner 965.
Wow, even the 965, that's their top running watch from the last generation.
Yeah, that one surprised some people. And also the Fenix 7 Pro and the Epix Pro series.
So if you just bought one of those relatively recently, thinking you had the latest and greatest, yeah, this might sting a bit.
Absolutely. And the comment section on the DC Rainmaker article definitely reflects that. There's a fair bit of frustration being voiced.
I can imagine. What are people saying? Is it just disappointment or?
It's definitely disappointment, especially
Valid.
from the 965 and Fenix 7 Pro Epix Pro owners. They feel like their expensive, fairly new watches are being, left behind already.
Yeah.
And you do see some comments from people saying, this makes them consider other brands next time. Brands maybe with a different update philosophy.
Right. Which brings us to the bigger picture, Garmin's whole strategy around updates. The article suggested this might be a shift, maybe going back to how they used to do things.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It looks like there's a potential return to a strategy more like what we saw in the 2010s.
Which was?
Basically, major new software features were primarily reserved for and used to sell the new hardware releases.
Ah, okay. Less porting back to older devices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is kind of different from the period between, say, 2020 and 2023, when Garmin was actually pretty good about bringing new stuff to existing watches via updates.
Mm.
Although it's fair to say the Edge Cycling computer team has generally been more consistent with updates all along, this potential shift seems more focused on the watch side.
So keeping the newest software features is a key reason to buy the newest watch model.
That seems to be the potential direction, yes.
How does that compare to what other companies are doing, like Apple, Coros, Polar?
Good question.
Yeah.
It varies quite a bit. Apple, for instance, usually supports watches with watchOS updates for several years back.
Right.
Polar tends to focus more on the current generation. Suno and Coros are maybe somewhere in between. Sun2 often updates its current lineup. Coros sometimes goes back a generation, sometimes not.
And Google, Samsung.
Google's Pixel Watch updates have generally hit existing devices. Samsung's a bit mixed. Older watches get some newer Wear OS stuff, but maybe not all the Samsung-specific features.
So where does this leave Garmin in comparison?
Well, the takeaway from the article is that with this potential strategy, Garmin is now leaning towards being one of the more, let's say, restrictive major players when it comes to bringing these big new software features back to older hardware.
Okay. But the article did offer a counterpoint, didn't it? Something about the number of features Garmin adds.
It did, yes. That's important context. Even if Garmin is more selective about which devices get the absolute latest stuff, their updates, when they happen, tend to be quite substantial. They often pack in a lot of features compared to competitors.
Right.
You know, Apple has one big watchOS update a year. Coros, which used to update frequently, has maybe slowed down a bit in terms of frequency and depth lately. So Garmin's approach might be fewer devices get the newest features immediately, but the updates themselves are often feature-rich.
Quality over quantity, perhaps, but targeted quantity.
Something like that, yeah. Substantial updates, but maybe more tied to newer hardware cycles now.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the user. What does all this mean for you if you own a Garmin or you're thinking of buying one? What are the key implications?
Well, firstly, thinking about those new features, the article author, Ray, highlighted a couple he found particularly useful from testing the 970.
Which ones?
The running tolerance impact load feature that whole system for gauging training stress and also the evening report.
Right, the recovery summary.
Yeah, he felt those could offer real value to a lot of users. The running tolerance, for instance, could genuinely help you fine-tune training and maybe avoid injuries.
Makes sense.
But the other big implication is that user frustration we talked about. Owners of recent expensive watches, like the 965 or Fenix 7 Pro, feeling left out.
Oh.
That's real. And it could genuinely push some people to look elsewhere next time.
Loyalty could take a hit.
It potentially could, yeah, especially in such a competitive market.
And you mentioned pricing earlier, or rather, the article did. There's a sale on. How does that factor in?
Right, the Garmin Spring Sale. It actually makes things interesting because it apparently narrowed the price difference between the new Forerunner 970 and the Fenix 8.
Oh.
Yeah, in some cases, the Fenix 8 is reportedly only slightly more expensive than the 970 during the sale.
Ah, okay. So if you really want those new features.
Exactly. And, you know, the Fenix 8 is slated to get them eventually.
Oh.
That current price point might make the Fenix 8 seem like a better deal, assuming you like the Fenix form factor and its other capabilities, of course.
That's a good point. It muddies the waters between those two models a bit, price-wise.
Definitely something to consider if you're in the market right now.
What about the other end of the spectrum? The article mentions someone still using a Forerunner 305. Do these new features even matter to everyone?
That's such a crucial perspective, isn't it? For a lot of users, an older watch that still tracks, runs accurately, gets GPS, shows heart rate, it does the job perfectly well.
Yeah.
These new metrics like running tolerance or impact load factor are advanced. Are they essential? Probably not for everyone. A lot of it comes down to individual needs versus, you know, maybe wanting the latest shiny object.
The FOMO factor, fear of missing out.
Totally. So if your current watch meets your needs, these new features might just be noise. But if you're deep into performance metrics, they might be compelling.
Right. It depends on what you use the watch for.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's try and wrap this up. What's the main takeaway message for listeners from this deep dive?
I think the key thing is clarity. know which models are currently planned to get these new 970 software features.
Yeah.
That's the Phoenix 8 series, Enduro 3 Tactics 8.
Right.
But remember that soft promise caveat about timing and which specific features make it?
And crucially,
Know which recent popular models are not currently on that list. That includes the Forerunner 265, Forerunner 965, Phoenix 7 Pro, and Epix Pro series.
got it. So manage your expectations based on the watch you have or are considering.
Exactly.
So maybe some food for thought for you listening. How does this evolving Garmin strategy fit with your own needs, your own upgrade cycle? Are these new features compelling enough to make you think about upgrading sooner rather than later?
Or does your current watch still tick all the boxes you need it to? It's worth reflecting on.
Yeah.
And hey, if you want way more detail, definitely check out the full DC Rainmaker article. His analysis is super in-depth, and the comment section is very lively. Lots of user perspectives there.
Good shout. Always interesting to see the community reaction.
For sure.
Okay, and one final thought to leave you with. What are the longer-term implications here? If Garmin does stick to this more restrictive update strategy for watches, how might that affect customer loyalty and their standing in what's becoming an increasingly packed field of sports tech?
Yeah, will it push more users to seriously consider alternatives? Brands that maybe handle updates differently.
Definitely something to ponder. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this deep dive.